In 1918, the guns of the First World War finally fell silent. After 20 million deaths, the global community swore to never repeat such slaughter. Yet, just 21 years later, humanity plunged right back into a conflict of exponential scale and horror. The Second Global War grew from the specific structural failures of the 1918 peace. The document signed to end the first conflict contained the precise pressures that would explode into the next. To understand how the world caught fire again, we have to look at the systemic collapse of economic, political, and diplomatic order during the 1920s and 30s. The choices made in the aftermath of the First War created the friction that would drive the Second. The breakdown began in the Hall of Mirrors. The Treaty of Versailles forced Germany to accept absolute guilt for the First World War. It stripped away key territories and imposed astronomical financial reparations, cultivating a deep national resentment. These financial demands shattered the German economy. Hyperinflation took hold, rendering the national currency useless. Millions of citizens found their life savings turned into worthless playthings, leaving a desperate populace searching for someone to blame. 10 years later, global stability faced a second shock. In 1929, the U.S. stock market crashed, sending economic waves worldwide. Supply chains froze, businesses collapsed, and massive lines of starving, unemployed citizens filled the streets of major cities. When populations face widespread starvation, established democratic institutions struggle to maintain control. People look towards strongmen who promise immediate, aggressive solutions. This environment of mass misery fed the spread of hyper-nationalist ideologies. In Italy, Benito Mussolini exploited the unrest to seize total control, rallying his followers around a militaristic vision of a restored Roman Empire. In Germany, Adolf Hitler used the severe economic depression and virulent anti-Semitic scapegoating to consolidate power in 1933. He promised the populace that he would rip up the Versailles Treaty and conquer vast new territories to provide living space for the German people. Concurrently in Asia, a resource-starved Imperial Japan embraced extreme militarism. Determining that their survival required vast natural resources, the Japanese military launched campaigns of conquest, invading neighboring regions like Manchuria and mainland China. The international mechanisms designed to stop such aggression proved entirely ineffective. As dictators violated treaties and amassed armies, Britain and France repeatedly chose a policy of appeasement, conceding to territorial demands in a bid to satisfy the aggressors without firing a shot. That leniency backfired. In August 1939, Hitler secured his eastern flank by signing a secret non-aggression pact with his ideological enemy, Joseph Stalin. Days later, on September 1st, German military forces rolled across the border into Poland, forcing Britain and France to finally declare war. Attempting to negotiate with unchecked aggression only signaled weakness to the dictators, accelerating the timeline to a total global collision. The First World War ground to a halt in stagnant trenches. The Second was defined by speed. Germany unleashed blitzkrieg, or lightning war, utilizing highly coordinated waves of tanks, motorized infantry, and dive bombers to overwhelm defenses before they could react. This mechanized assault swept across Western Europe. France fell in a matter of months, leaving an isolated Britain to endure a brutal, month-long aerial bombardment campaign against its cities. But the scale of the conflict expanded in 1941, driven by two catastrophic miscalculations by the Axis powers. First, Hitler broke his pact with Stalin, launching the largest land invasion in human history directly into the Soviet Union. This opened the Eastern Front, a theater of combat defined by sheer ideological brutality. In the ruins of cities like Stalingrad, the fighting resulted in over 2 million casualties in a single battle. The second massive escalation occurred on December 7, 1941. Seeking to neutralize the American naval fleet, Imperial Japan launched a surprise aerial strike on Pearl Harbor, Hawaii. By simultaneously betraying the Soviet Union and directly attacking the United States, the Axis forces provoked two massive, untapped industrial giants. By 1942, the Axis faced the full manufacturing capacity of the United States and the sheer endurance of the Soviet Union. In this conflict, the traditional definition of a combatant dissolved. Cities, factories, and residential blocks were treated as primary military targets. The Nazi regime orchestrated the Holocaust, demonstrating the darkest depths of human depravity. Through a network of concentration and extermination camps, they executed the industrialized, systematic genocide of 6 million Jews and millions of others with factory-like efficiency. By 1944, the combined weight of the Allied forces began to crush the Axis military machine. The Soviet army pushed from the east, while American, British, and Canadian forces stormed the beaches of Normandy, opening a massive Western front that ultimately forced Germany's unconditional surrender. Yet the fighting in the Pacific raged on. American forces engaged in a grueling island-hopping campaign, sustaining heavy casualties to push Japanese forces back across thousands of miles of ocean. The climax arrived with a terrifying technological breakthrough. In August 1945, the United States deployed 2 atomic bombs over the Japanese cities of Hiroshima and Nagasaki, instantly incinerating tens of thousands of people. Faced with absolute city-leveling destruction from a single weapon, Japan unconditionally surrendered. The deadliest conflict in human history was brought to an abrupt and chilling halt. The world that emerged from the smoke of 1945 bore little resemblance to the one that entered it. The ruins of this conflict provided the exact geopolitical architecture that dictates our reality today. First came the Cold War. The exhaustion of the old European empires left a global power vacuum. This space was immediately filled by 2 ideologically opposed superpowers, the capitalist United States and the communist Soviet Union, splitting the globe down the middle for decades. Second, the physical and financial devastation of the European powers dealt a final blow to global imperialism. Britain, France, and other colonial powers simply lacked the strength and capital required to suppress overseas territories. This sparked a wave of decolonization. Over the next 20 years, powerful independence movements dismantled old empires, resulting in the establishment of dozens of sovereign nations across Asia and the African continent. Third, determined not to repeat the mistakes of the interwar period, the victorious powers established the United Nations. This global body was designed with actual enforcement mechanisms to maintain borders and check aggressive regimes. They drafted international laws defining human rights and constructed structural economic stabilizers, like the World Bank and the IMF, specifically designed to prevent the kind of global financial collapse that had fueled the rise of fascism. Finally, humanity entered the atomic age. The deployment of nuclear weapons meant that for the first time, human existence depended on the restraint of those holding the power of total self-annihilation. Ironically, the terror of this destruction established a rigid boundary. Mutually assured destruction has forced the major global superpowers to avoid direct, total warfare ever since. World War II serves as the ultimate historical proof that modern civilization is inherently fragile. It demonstrates that democratic institutions can rapidly erode under the pressure of economic collapse, leaving populations vulnerable to radical extremism. The international borders, treaties, and relative global stability we navigate today were not guaranteed. They were paid for by the sacrifice of more than 70 million human lives. The structures we inherited are not self-sustaining. True peace requires active global cooperation, sharp vigilance against authoritarianism, and an absolute refusal to repeat the deadly leniency of the past.